Hi everyone. Today I want to tell you the story of chemistry. And this story was written a number of years ago by a Montessori teacher named D. Allen Temple. And I'll tell it today as best I can to his script. You know that humans have been progressing as chemists for about 25,000 years. That's a very long time. But you know that working with chemicals and mixing chemicals doesn't necessarily make one a chemist. To be a chemist, you must work in a certain way and you must use a certain method in order to really be a scientist. You know, to find out about the fundamental human needs, human beings, as long as they've been on our planet, have had to make discoveries. They've been involved in those discoveries, and many of those discoveries were based in chemistry. The early people saw chemical reactions, but they may not have understood exactly why they happened. Could it be magic? Was it the gods at play? So ordinary people asked simple questions. Why? And they explored the reasons why those things happened. The first major discovery in chemistry, I think, would have been fire. Why fire? Well, combustion itself, when something ignites on fire, that's a chemical change. The flame causes wood to become charcoal or carbon, as you would find it on the periodic table of elements. Early people saw that something burning, some things might burn better than other things, and they wondered why. Why would something burn better than another thing? Well, that's also because of chemistry. But the cause of the burning was still a puzzle. They would have seen burning start by lightning, volcanoes, maybe spontaneous combustion, these things we've talked about in class. Um, for example, you can have a pile of hay or a pile of grass and straw that dries out and is there, and nothing special really happens to it, but some bacteria might move in and use it as a home. And just the bacteria living in that pile of straw and hay cause heat. And soon enough, some of it sparks into embers, and then those embers ignite into flames. And that looks like a spontaneous combustion, although it's a process that's been happening at the bacterial level for a long time. Early humans noticed fire about 1 million years ago. I mean, we can't really say for sure, but the best guess is about 1 million years ago. They were able to control it for warmth so that they could keep warm in their dwellings, their caves, their homes, and they could use it for cooking. And they did this, they were able to control it and use it for cooking about 4 to 500,000 years ago. The second major chemical thing that humans discovered was that they could use fire to turn clay into pottery. So, in around 6,000 before the Common Era in Egypt, Iran, and Iraq, those are the modern day locations, they could dig clay from the sides of the riverbanks, and clay was made up of aluminum silicate. Aluminum silicate could be shaped when wet and molded into whatever you wanted it to be, and then those people found that if they left it out, it could dry out, and if they left it out even longer in the sun and it baked in the sun, it would almost turn into stone, so it became pottery. Someone discovered that special clays could be used, and that would add color. And lots of experiments with thickness and different materials like straw and grass could be used when doing this. But in order for it to work really well, they also discovered that the hotter they could get the fire, the better it would work. So people started to design something called a kiln, or an oven, where the temperature could go between 300 degrees Celsius to 550 degrees Celsius. Only in the last few hundred years have people really discovered why this firing works. And what happens is that there's crystals inside the clay that arrange themselves into a new pattern when the clay is being fired, and that causes it to harden and become pottery. And that's a pretty special chemical process. The third big discovery of chemistry was when people discovered liquid metal. So they could have been sitting around a fire one day and the rocks were kind of around the fire and the heat was being generated inside the fire, but they noticed a kind of liquid that was shiny pouring out of some of the rocks because those rocks were actually ore. In the Sinai Peninsula, it's very rich with copper ore. It's kind of like a blue-green rock, and they may have had it in their fires. After millions of observations of this kind of melting rock, people began to ask other questions. And what do you think they discovered? Well, they discovered that metal is different than stone, and that some rock worked for this and some didn't. So you needed ore in order to get the metal to ooze out like this. And eventually they perfected the process called smelting, which is where you take the metal out of the rock. Around 3000 before the Common Era, humans made a wax version of a tool. So they perfected whatever the shape of the tool they want, and then they encased it in clay. So inside the clay, kind of like clay brick, there was a tool, and then they put a hole to the wax. Then they fired the clay just like they were making pottery. And of course, what do you think would happen when they did that? Well, the wax either poured out as a liquid or vaporized and became a gas and came out of the hole. But now they had a solid with the shape of what the tool should be inside. So they would wait for that to cool, and then they would pour in some liquid metal, and it was kind of like a mold that they could use. And then when they let that liquid metal cool, they would smash the clay, and then they would have a metal tool. Soon, all of the surface ores, the ores that they could find on top of the ground, were used up. So people needed to figure out something else. How could they go deeper into the Earth's crust to find deeper ores? Well, soon they did that, and they discovered lead and gold and silver and tin. And then there was another really great discovery. And that was that they could combine different kinds of metals in a liquid form to make a harder metal. And what they discovered was that if they mixed copper and tin together, they could make a harder metal called bronze. Smelting iron was attempted around the same time, but it took a long time to perfect. So it took about another 1,500 years because it needed much higher temperatures in order to burn off all the impurities in the metal. The fourth great discovery of chemistry from our early human ancestors is glass. Glass, the earliest known kind of artifacts of glass that we have are from ancient Egypt, about 3,500 before the Common Era. But we think that glass became common around all of the civilizations around 1500 before the Common Era. To make glass, you need 3 ingredients: sand, lime, and soda. Or you could substitute the soda with potash because it's got the same kind of chemical compounds. But human beings had to learn the recipe, and they had to learn how specifically to blend those ingredients and how to heat them. And it required a great deal of heat as well. 1,200 degrees Celsius is required in order to make glass. But the early people had taken the first steps to being scientists and to discovering these 4 things. Many of them were craftspeople, and they were very proud of their accomplishments, as I would think we should all be. The first book of chemistry was written around 3,600 years ago in Mesopotamia. And do you know what was inside that book? It was a recipe for making a copper and lead glaze for firing clay into pottery. And that was our first book of chemistry. This is the first part of the story of chemistry. The second part takes place when we can start identifying the individual people who had a part in our history of chemistry. But for today, I'm going to leave it with the first part. Have a great day.